Mao, one of the political giants of the 20th century, is dead at the age of 82. And the people of China mourn the man who shaped their lives and destinies for more than a quarter of a century. China in the 1920s, a troubled land with a fabled history, once the most advanced civilization on Earth. The site of the Great Wall, built in the 3rd century BC, and the nation that gave the world the compass, gunpowder, silk, and Chinaware. This is the ancient greatness that Mao Zedong sets out to reclaim. In their mountain sanctuary, Mao's followers are taught his communist philosophy of conquest. The enemy advances, we retreat. The enemy camps, we harass. The enemy tires, we attack, we pursue. The enemy is Chiang Kai-shek and his nationalist government, struggling to unite a backward, divided country. Thus begin 2 decades of civil war and Japanese aggression during the 1930s and 1940s. Japan surrenders, World War II ends, but China is a ravaged land as Mao resumes his guerrilla warfare. Famine is widespread, people eat grass. In an attempt to end the fighting, President Truman sends General George C. Marshall to Shanghai to meet with leaders of the nationalist and communist forces. After discussions that include Mao's trusted lieutenant, Zhou Enlai, agreement is reached for the establishment of a coalition government. In time, Mao Zedong renounces the compromise settlement and full-scale civil war begins again. The fighting goes on for 4 years, and the communists expand their hold on the countryside until, in Mao's words, the cities of China fall like ripe fruit. Victory is complete as the Red leader enters Shanghai, capital of nationalist China. The bamboo curtain drops around 1/4 of the world's population. Fighting ends, peace comes. On October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong proclaims the birth of the People's Republic of China in the new communist capital of Peking. Our country will never again be an insulted nation, says Mao. We have stood up. Chiang Kai-shek flees to the island of Formosa, signs a mutual defense treaty with the United States, and vows one day to return and liberate the mainland. In June 1950, North Korea, Communist China's neighbor, invades South Korea. The Soviet Union is boycotting the United Nations Security Council, and in its absence, a resolution is passed authorizing military assistance for South Korea. The UN force is made up of volunteers from 18 nations. General Douglas MacArthur is placed in command, and the North Korean advance is halted. The tide of battle turns. The Allied forces go on the offensive, moving forward, northward. MacArthur makes a fateful decision, sending UN troops across the 38th parallel and into North Korea. Communist China intervenes as UN forces near its border. The war goes on for 3 years. More than 50,000 American servicemen lose their lives, and another 150,000 are wounded. In July 1953, UN representatives and North Korean officials meet at Panmunjom to sign an armistice agreement that ends the long and costly struggle. An exchange of prisoners of war is arranged, and thousands of UN troops end months and years of internment as they pass through and are greeted at the Freedom Gate in Panmunjom. The United States and her allies have paid a high price to defend and preserve the independence of South Korea. To the north, Chinese troops are cheered and hailed as they prepare to withdraw to their homeland. Mao claims a momentous victory for the People's Republic and dismisses the United States as a paper tiger. On Formosa, renamed Taiwan, nationalist China is ready, says Madame Chiang Kai-shek, to invade the mainland.
It thus strikes us as strange to be asked, as we are so often asked, do you expect to return to mainland China? If a member of one's community should be forced from his house by lawless elements, if most of his belongings are seized, and if some members of his family are held captive in the house, would one ask him, do you want your house back someday? Yes, we believe we will go back.
Through the 1950s, Secretary of State Dulles becomes the symbol of America's support for nationalist China and non-recognition of communist China. The American 7th Fleet cruises the waters between Taiwan and the mainland as a deterrent to any invasion of Chiang's island fortress. The U.S. military presence helps to maintain an uneasy status quo between the two Chinas. Inside the People's Republic, unification is complete. Mao Zedong and his trusted Chief of Staff, Zhou Enlai, have made Communist China an emerging superpower by brutal force and rigid discipline. In 1955, Mao sends an assault armada against a tiny nationalist-held island off the mainland. The operation is carried out with only token resistance. Despite threats and warnings, Mao never attacks the nationalists on Taiwan, and in turn, Chiang never launches his promised invasion of the mainland. In the United Nations, American delegates oppose membership for Communist China and label her an aggressor.
The United States will vote against the resolution to expel one of our members in order to make room for the regime in Taiping. No delegation in this debate has been able to refute what is in fact undeniable, that Communist China does not meet the requirements clearly set out in Article 4 of the Charter for participation in this organization. Both in words and in deeds, Communist China rejects the commitment required of member states to settle their disputes by peaceful means and to abandon the use or threat of force in international relations.
In the early 1960s, American and Communist Chinese officials meet in Warsaw in a futile attempt to find ways of resuming normal diplomatic relations. By 1971, there are enough communist and third world countries in the United Nations to expel nationalist China from membership. The action is angrily denounced by the delegate from Taiwan.
We shall continue to struggle with the like-minded governments for the realization of the ideals upon which the United Nations was founded, but which the General Assembly has now betrayed. We are confident that the cause for which we have been fighting for more than a quarter of a century will in the end prevail.
All that remains is for the roll call vote that grants the People's Republic membership in the World Organization. Loud applause and spontaneous celebrations greet the completion of the balloting and the announcement of the results.
The result of the voting is as follows: in favor 76, opposed 35, abstention 17. The draft resolution adopted.
Nationalist China, first country to sign the UN Charter, is now the first member expelled. Next, a dramatic about-face in Chinese-American relations. Secretary of State Kissinger meets secretly with Mao Zedong, and plans are made for President Nixon to visit mainland China. February 1972, 22 years of hostility end as the presidential plane arrives in Peking. Some observers believe the Nixon trip during a presidential election year is politically motivated. Peking's positive response, they say, reflects a growing distrust and widening ideological split between Russia and the People's Republic. Whatever the reason, East meets West, and for 8 momentous days, the leaders of the two superpowers explore the road to rapprochement. President Nixon and Chairman Mao acknowledge basic differences between their countries, but at the same time agree to work toward normalization of relations and ways of preventing international war. The bamboo curtain is raised for freer travel and greater trade between the People's Republic and the United States. But while diplomatic representatives are exchanged, full relations are not resumed. In September 1976, death claims Mao Zedong, the prophet, teacher, guide, and architect of China's rebirth to greatness, has outlived Chiang Kai-shek by a year. Even as Mao is mourned, his successor is named. A political moderate, Kuo-feng, Mao's widow, is purged. Day and night, a never-ending line of mourners files past the mortal remains of Mao Zedong, the only leader that China has known since the Communist armies marched into Peking to establish the People's Republic. As the new party chairman assumes power and meets with foreign diplomats, China enters an uncertain era. Mao's widow and her radical followers who favor permanent revolution are bitterly opposed to Kuo-feng. For the 850 million people in communist China, troubled days and fateful decisions lie ahead. Continued rapprochement with the United States, closer ties with the Soviet Union, or a triangular relationship with both. These are among the major decisions to be made by the new regime as the People's Republic passes out of Mao Zedong's shadow and into a time of trial and testing from within and without.